To my daughter, because your mom says you will be a girl. It's an odd thing to say, but I feel like in some respect, you've taught me so much already. You aren't even here, nor have you been conceived, and yet in so many ways, you have taught me to look at myself so differently than I used to. I never had to think about race growing up. We were what society considers typical. A nuclear family with two heterosexual parents. Most aspects of my parents' cultural history, mostly Irish, were offloaded in favor of assimilating to the culture of homogeneous whiteness. My father was a carpenter, and my mother a homemaker. By the time I reached age 9, my working-class father had enough income to afford us a new, much larger home in a cul-de-sac, where the majority of my neighbors were generally white like me. From then on out, I had a sense that we had complete control of our own destiny, much like westward pioneers who shared my skin color hundreds of years ago probably did. I was always taught to value diversity, but these were just ideas to me. From the vantage point of a white, heterosexual, cisgendered male in a middle-class suburb, I could only intellectualize the experience of anyone who did not fit into the box of society the way that I could. I was born into privileges and social acceptance merely based on my skin color, gender, sexuality, and neurotypicality. English, being my primary and only language, afforded me seamless integration into the education system. In grade school, most of my peers looked like me, and this afforded me social armor and inclusivity. Best, I could only intellectualize what it was like to be other. I naively believed that accepting diversity meant I was a good person, as if agreeing with an empirical truth was a sort of moral superiority. Your mom was adopted as a toddler from South Korea by a white, Polish and German couple. Effectively, she was dropped into the homogeneous whiteness of a middle-class life in a white suburb, much like the one I was sheltered by. However, as I got to know and fall in love with your mom, I began to realize how her Asian features meant she would be treated differently and that my whiteness afforded me racial armor. I knew the day I met your mom that she would turn my world upside down. We talked for hours, and through that began planning a life together. I'd never empathetically considered the perspective of someone outside of my race. I intellectually understood that she had to deal with micro and macro aggressions on a daily basis, like any other person of color in America, but I didn't understand what it felt like. I also didn't understand that there were parts of myself that desired her otherness, even exotified her at times. At all times I loved her, as I do to this day, but early in our relationship, my love operated through a lens that I didn't know filtered it. I didn't want children until I met your mom. I was afraid of everything that bringing a life into this world would dredge up for me, as it had for my father throughout my childhood. We begin learning young. Education begins immediately, and various parts of my education were not ones I was willing to pass on, ones I felt I was cursed to pass on. However, your mom saw things within me that I wasn't willing to see within myself. The thing I clung to from my childhood as my family heirloom, my resilience, thrust upon me from an early age, wasn't my greatest strength in her eyes. Instead, she pointed to my ability to change. Over the years, and as I write this, we've done a lot of work on ourselves. It was your mom who suggested I begin meeting with a therapist regularly, as she did, as a way to finally begin healing. It's never fair reliving the trials, tribulations, and trauma endured in order to find closure. But it is necessary to be the parent that you deserve and the teacher that I want to be. Right now, parts of you make up the atoms and molecules inside of me, inside of her, and around us both. In some respect, you are with us now, even before you have come to be. We live in a world of superficially constructed social hierarchies, and you will someday enter that world as well. My fear is that the greatest defense that my family passed down to me, my racial armor, I will not be able to pass down to you. We live in a world where even if you are half white, you will not be white. In some ways, you may have it harder than both your mom and I had, being stuck between two worlds, not easily categorized through the racialized lens of what will be your country of origin. Some of my own family will not see you as similar to them, and you will become the first non-white member of my bloodline. Some people will look at our family and see you as the product of racial fetishization, whereas others will simply look at you and play the guessing game. What kind of Asian are you? Sometimes I think about what parts of myself I will see in you when I first get to meet you. What I've realized is that I'm not afraid that the world may reject you. All of these fears are constructed within my own mind, which means I'm afraid that due to my own implicit biases and unconscious racism downloaded through varying levels of existing white supremacist structures, I will reject you. So you see, you are the reason I want to be a teacher. This journey has taught me that I want my greatest act of teaching to be providing you, my daughter, with an education of love, acceptance, and understanding. It was the energy of you, the thought of you, that brought me to understand how afraid I am, not just of you, but of what it would feel like to not be accepted, loved, seen, and heard. The thought of you has widened the lens from which I view teaching. I now consider the importance of inclusivity, representation, and cultural awareness. I have expanded my worldview to include more than just the dominant cultural perspective. When I think of students in the classroom, I think about how the constructs of society and even teaching often do not include anyone outside of that dominant culture. One pedagogical truth I hold close is that the act of teaching cannot be one-sided, that education must always be mutual, or it simply does not happen. I know this to be true because already you have taught me so much about myself. How much I must continue learning. How afraid I am at times. But also that I can bend into and out of that fear, as your beautiful mom saw in me. When we first decided we wanted to build a life together, where you could be safe, loved, and accepted. I want to teach you all of these things, and someday you will understand that the paradox of love between a parent and child is that you'd already taught them to me before you were ever born. I love you.